It has to do with the story of Don't Give Up the Ship, as important as it was to me, really. Major Law is one of the best commanders I ever had. And he stood up in front of the flight one morning and he says, I have a request from the Aviation Digest, the publishers of the Aviation Digest at Fort Rucker, Alabama, and they are going under. They don't have enough stories from you veterans returning from Vietnam. And we want participation. We want to keep that magazine alive, and it's still alive. And so they need stories. Need a volunteer for one story. Nobody raised their hand. So the next thing I know, this one guy says, "Sir, I got a suggestion. How about the newest member of the flight can be picked?" And he said, "That's a good idea, Ben Trevino." He said, "You'll do it." I said, "I don't know anything about writing." And he said, "Oh, you can tell about a combat story, a maintenance story, whatever. Everybody's got war stories." And I said, "But I don't know how to write or nothing." He said, I'm a English major. I'll help you if I have to." So, okay, I got selected to write that story. There's a lot of flights in this flight training. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm not exaggerating, but there might have been 10 flights or so. Out of all of those people, mine was selected, and I call it Don't Give Up the Ship. And I have related to some extent what happened with this war story when I lost my friend, McAllister, and he got shot down, and me almost losing my ship. I mean, almost lost it, and almost lost our lives as well. So that's the story that really was generated, or that I related in the book. We were on a regular mission. I was carrying this colonel. We were on a command and control kind of mission, and we heard a Mayday call on the company radio, more of a scream or whatever, and what it said, "Any minute, man, aircraft," and then the transmission ceased, and everybody who was listening knew the voice, and it was a close friend of mine who had apparently ran into some problems. And the fact that the transmission ceased, we don't know if the radio was severed or whatever. Then we went into inquisition mode, and we started saying or calling Minuteman 1-3. He was in the first platoon. McAllister was his name. And then so that set the alarm, and we got to looking into it, and I found out the unit that he was supporting that day, that McAllister was supporting that day, because we recognized the voice on the radio. I called operations, and I got the people he was working for, and I got from them where he was, the location, and what time he had left, and I did the calculations, and we headed in that direction and found a column of smoke. My crew chief saw the smoke, and he says, "There it is, sir, up 1 o'clock, 20 miles." And I, yeah, okay. So we headed that way, and it was in Tam Key, Vietnam. When I arrived at the scene, there was a gunfire. We took some 50 caliber fire at the same point where I was approaching. First thing I saw was Cobras orbiting that, and then the scout ship orbiting the smoke. And then I communicated with him on the guard frequency, which opened up the whole network of aviators in the air who were monitoring. And so the next thing I know, the Air Force got involved in trying to suppress the fire from that hilltop that I was pointing out. And all of this was over the radio, and I asked what they had down there, source of smoke, and they indicated there were 4 bodies burning in the helicopter in a clear area. I asked the other element to go ahead and they might as well leave. We're going to take over from here. I landed by the wreckage. There's a rotor blade that came off of the helicopter prior to crashing, and it was within 20 yards or 30 yards. The rotor blade was stuck in the ground. The indication was that when McAllister arrived at the semi-clear area with elephant grass only, he did a drastic flare, and he encountered what is called mass bumping, where the rotor blade will flex to a point that it'll sever the mast, and it separated the rotor blade and it's stuck in the ground that close to the wreckage. That was the indication we had. I had landed. The colonel got out and he had a private with him with his rifle. They got out, walked through the elephant grass, and came back to the helicopter, huffing and puffing, and he threw the rifle onto the aircraft and he said, "Let's get out of here, Mr. T. There's some movement down there and it's not friendly." That's when I went ahead and formed up a flight of maybe 3 or 4 helicopters. I think it was 4. And the commander who I had on board volunteered his troops. And we went over there with water and with troops. We brought the troops and put them in around the burning helicopter. And I went to the Tamki airstrip, landed to wait for those folks to cool down the body. After we landed in a trail formation, 4 of us, and a Marine came out and approached me because I was in the lead, and he says, "Are you guys going to be here long?" I said, "Well, just long enough to pick up some troops waiting on a phone call or a radio call." And he said, "I wouldn't stick around very long because this is about what time we got mortared yesterday. You see that hooch over there?" And it was all blown to pieces. And I said, "Yeah, I see that." He said, "Yeah, we got hit about this time yesterday." So I said, "Okay." So I called the flight, says, "Okay, we're coming up, operating RPM, and we'll lift in 5 seconds." And we did. Took off and trail. And I was in the lead, so when I took off, I encountered the closest situation where we almost wound up the same way as my friend. I had just told the flight, "Okay, let's come up diamond formation," and I visualize all of this in my mind. Visualize that everybody's in the process of reorganizing back there, like I ordered. Come up on in a diamond formation to go back. And then I took the hit. The bullet hit right behind I was in the left seat, right by the doorpost, across there, and it severed a hydraulic servo that is probably about a 3-inch diameter hole that got severed right in the middle through a bullet. And so you had two hydraulic servos, left and right, and the one on the left, I believe it was, took the hit. So the other one was functioning, and the left one was not. So the helicopter did what we call a cyclic hard-o. And I saw the cyclic come back and to the left, and so it took an extreme amount of force for us to keep it, to get it level. But at one point, and this was confirmed by some of the people behind me who told me later that my attitude was exactly perpendicular to the ground, nose high. And that's impossible to fly the helicopter that way, not for any length of time, because it's going to want to fly backwards and eventually fall on its back. We thought we were gone. We thought we were going to crash. And the crew chief and gunners were screaming. I could hear them. And all of the thoughts going through my mind about, like they say, you live your life before you die. Sometimes you just relive your whole life in only a matter of seconds, and that's what it appeared that happened. I mean, I just thinking of so many things. I'm thinking crew chief, gunner, poor guys, they have no control. I'm thinking, do I have life insurance? Did I tell my wife I love her? Oh, and the last letter I sent, and whatever. So many things go through my mind. Thank God for my co-pilot, or we call him Peter Pilot. He was a strong guy. He helped me bring the cyclic back. We got it upright. The door guns came hot on the source of fire down below, which we had no idea. It was one shot Charlie who shot us from maybe 10 o'clock low or whatever. That was my guess, because the bullet came in on the left side by the doorpost and went diagonally across and got my servo, which is on the transmission column. So we flew back to home base. Somebody else followed me in, and we could only get about 30 knots out of the helicopter. And normally it's about 80, 90 knots, is what we fly at. It was about 15, 20 minutes flight, struggling with that cyclic. I had my crew members drop all the ammunition we had and whatever off inside the perimeter fence. The tower had cleared me to the main runway, and he said, after you land, go ahead and move it from there to here. And I said, if I land this thing safely, I'm not going anywhere. So he changed my landing to a crosswind runway instead. And we did what we call a running landing. When you have inadequate control, you plan on a running landing. So we did that. You do not have the finesse that you normally would have, so you're roughing it to the ground. You need to do a running landing because it's more forgiving than a landing to a hover. Landing to a hover is going to give you an arm load when you get close, when you get at a hover. So you need to set it down. They call it a running landing or run-on landing. And so we did the running landing, and as we were waiting on our maintenance ship, who was called, their call sign is Knuckle Buster, they came out and they landed. They had the rotor blade they had extracted out of the ground. They put it across their helicopter, and it looked like a half helicopter, half airplane. They landed at the airstrip. They replaced my servo. I headed home right after they fixed it. The problem was we were being hit all the way around. there was a tower a nearby air base there, or a nearby post that reported being overrun and getting mortared and everything else, and I wanted to go and respond to that, but we had no ammo. We had dropped it all off in the face of fire. So I went on to home base, and then it brings up the other story about my replacement ship. There was only one ship left that was flyable, and it was my friend's ship who had just gotten hit. He took a hit in the groin area, and it left a bullet hole in the chin bubble, which is what I pointed out before. And there was blood and stuff there. And they told me, well, when I got to home base, they said, we only got this one ship. It smells like blood and all that, and it's got a bullet hole, but you can take it. And so I did, and then went on with the mission. The landing that I had made there at the airport was such that it's one of those that calls for what the Army has. It's a broken wing award for anybody who can salvage an aircraft under such cases. But all of this was overshadowed by, of course, the loss of our brothers. And so that was inconsequential to me, because the main thing was that we were okay, and we really felt bad about what had happened to our brothers. I have a map of that area where all of this took place, where the helicopter was shot down and where I had my fiasco. But that was a very busy day. A lot of beer was drank that night too.